Today we're going to try something different on this channel. I haven't tried this before, so let's just jump into it. Basically, I found this video the other day, and it's called "The Language Learning Industry is Lying to You." And the title of it and everything just kind of jumped out at me. I was like, I wonder what kind of things he's going to say about the industry, because I was like, I'm kind of in the industry. I have my own programs online where I teach people the language and stuff. So it seems to make sense that if he's going to say a bunch of things that are bad about it, maybe it's going to be something that affects me. So fair warning, I actually have seen this video all the way through before this, so this is not like a blind reaction, but this is something that I thought this deserves an actual recognition of whether or not this is good advice or not. So let's just jump into it and see what this guy has to say.
I'm going to say something that is going to make a lot of people on the internet very angry, and I genuinely do not care.
That, by the way, is the perfect attitude for your entire life. If something on the internet is going to make other people on the internet mad, is it the truth? Say it. It doesn't matter. People getting mad on the internet is what people on the internet do. So I guarantee you, no matter which side of whatever argument you think I'm talking about, you're going to say people in the comments down below who are going to be saying like, I can't believe he said that. That's ridiculous. It doesn't even matter what you said. They're going to argue with you no matter what. So off to a great start. I don't care whether or not you're mad at me.
Watching Netflix in another language will not make you fluent.
True. Just passively sitting around watching anything is not going to make you fluent. It's just not how language learning works.
Duolingo is a waste of time and it will not make you fluent.
Also true. I've said this many times on this channel.
And immersing yourself by passively consuming content will not make you fluent either.
Also true. I've said this many times on this channel. If you're passively doing anything language learning related, it's probably not going to make that big of an impact on what it is that you're actually learning. It's just going to be background noise while you're doing something else, and that's not actually learning. That's not helping you in any way. This is just you turning some wheels and spinning some wheels and not really doing much of anything.
I know. You've seen the YouTube videos, you've read the Reddit threads, you've been told that if you just relax and you watch enough videos, the language will somehow seep into your brain while you sit on your sofa. Spoiler alert, it won't. And deep down, after years of trying it, you already know that. Today, I'm going to explain exactly why this approach fails, and more importantly, what actually works instead. This video is going to save you years of wasted time. Stay with me.
So yeah, off to a great start. Can't disagree with anything that he said so far. If you're doing any language learning that's passive, it's probably not going to be doing you any good whatsoever. So let's see what he's got to say.
My name is Mikkel. I'm a hyper-polyglot. I speak 12 languages, and I developed my language learning system at the Innovation Center of the University of Deusto in San Sebastian. I've helped thousands of people go from zero to fluent fast. I'm going to tell you what works and what doesn't work. And the most common thing I see people wasting their time on is what I want to talk about today. There is a very seductive idea that has spread through the language learning community the last few years. It goes by different names: comprehensible input, language immersion, learning like a child, and a bunch of other names they made up.
Okay, let's start by the fact that those things are not the same. And thinking that they are is part of what's going to cause him problems throughout this video. But comprehensible input is the kind of new age thing that is coming out in language learning. It's kind of the big talk of the town, as it were, for language teachers who actually still teach in the classroom like I do. And it's kind of the new buzzword. It's basically the idea is that you keep with authentic materials, but you use them in such a way that they are comprehensible for you so that you can pick out the vocab that you do know and then use that to build up the vocab that you don't know. It's kind of a twist on the traditional immersion thing. Immersion learning is just not the way that language learning works for most adults or even children for that matter. Immersing yourself without having any context is just going to frustrate you and annoy you. So if you start day one in a class that is just immersion, I encourage you to just drop that class because that class is probably not going to get you as far as you think it's going to. But the third thing that he said was learning like a child, and learning like a child would mean that it takes you about 5 years before you can have a real conversation without people being confused about what you're talking about. So if that's what you're going for, like 5 years from now, barely being able to hold a conversation, by all means, learn like a child. But otherwise, let's go back to the video.
The pitch sounds amazing. Just consume content in the language. Watch TV. Watch thousands of hours of YouTube videos, and your brain will do the rest. And I understand why people love this idea. It requires no effort. You can do it while eating Cheetos, while commuting, while lying in bed. It feels like learning. But feeling like learning and actually learning are two completely different things.
Nailed it. That's what's wrong with Duolingo, is that it's a time suck. That's all it is. You spend 5 minutes a day on Duolingo and you think you're going to eventually be fluent. That's not how language learning works. Yeah, it's fun. You get to click some buttons. You get a little award. You get a streak bonus and all of the things. It's got gamification out the wazoo, but what it doesn't have is language learning, which is kind of the point. If you thought that the idea of Duolingo was going to do something that's just miraculous and all of a sudden teach you, I can tell you that the people from Duolingo don't believe it. They don't actually want you to learn these things. They want you to have a fun time. And learning a pretend language like Klingon, or learning something that's not even a language, such as programming stuff, then yeah, you're not really here for the language learning. You're just there to collect people's data and probably a little bit of their money.
Here's the reality check. I see adults who have been watching TV shows in Spanish for 3, 4, 5 years, and they know the theme songs, and they recognize some words, and they feel connected to the language, but put them in front of a native speaker and they freeze completely. Because passive consumption is not language learning. It is entertainment with a side of guilt reduction. Now, let's address the biggest argument in favor of this approach. But that's how children learn languages naturally. We should learn like children learn. And yeah, this sounds convincing until you actually look at the numbers. A child learning their first language gets somewhere between 10 and 30,000 hours of immersive contact with the language before they can hold a proper adult conversation. 10 to 30,000 hours. That's an astronomical investment of time. And even then, are children actually good at learning languages? If you think about it honestly, a 5-year-old speaks their native language at the level of a 5-year-old. They constantly make mistakes, they mispronounce words, they forget vocabulary, and they need years of correction before they speak correctly. We don't exactly call that efficient language learning, do we? The reason children become fluent is not because they're using some magical technique or they are geniuses, naturally better or anything like that. It's because they have literally nothing else to do for the first 10 years of their life.
I have been hammering this for months now on this channel, that learning like a child is stupid because you are not a child. You are a grown person trying to learn a language, and if you think that learning like a child is the key to your success, you are not understanding how language learning and even learning in general works. Like, if you learned how to do anything else like a child does, you would end up failing miserably at that thing. So why this still is a thing that people keep saying is because children look like they're not trying at it, and they end up learning the language anyway. But it's also the only way they can survive. And that's not what you are doing. You are learning this on the side when you probably have like a day job and stuff. You can't learn like a child because that's not how the world works. Not even just language learning, how it works. It's not how the world works. So just drop it. Stop trying to learn like a child. You're grown.
You are not a child. You do not have 10 years ahead of you to slowly absorb the language. You have a job. You have a life. You have responsibilities. You need a method that respects your time. And passive immersion is not that method. Let me tell you about some people I used to work with. When I was living in Austria, I worked with a group of guys from the Balkans. Serbs, Croats, Romanians, great people. Really fun to be around. And they told me that when they were growing up, their moms were obsessed with Latin American telenovelas in Spanish. Venezuelan, Colombian, all that stuff, with subtitles. Those guys grew up with Spanish playing in the background all the time, at home. For years. Thousands of hours of Spanish audio with subtitles. And can you guess how much Spanish they could actually understand and speak? after all that exposure. They knew a few words, a handful of dramatic phrases, and that's basically it. After thousands of hours of passive input, all they had to show for were a few words and some soap opera lines. That's what you get with so-called comprehensible input.
This is where I have a problem, and that is that what he's just described is not comprehensible input. What he's just described is having background noise of some language going on in there, and you're not even really paying attention to whether or not you know any of the words, what the words mean, you're not interacting with the content in any way. That's not what comprehensible input is for. That's not how the system works. And if you think that that's what comprehensible input is, then obviously you're going to think it doesn't work because you're not actually addressing what the comprehensible input idea is and how it works and what it's trying to do. So I'm going to come back to that here in a little bit, but basically what he's just described there is passively watching something in the background while you're off in your own la-la land in your brain. That's not what comprehensible input is, and therefore his assessment of whether or not comprehensible input is actually good is wrong. But it's even more fun once we get towards the end of the video, and I'll talk about that once he actually gets to it.
That is what passive immersion actually produces when there is no active engagement. Basically nothing. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. But what about the children? Will nobody think of the children? Yes, the immigrant kids who learn the language really fast and become fluent really fast. Steven Krashen keeps banging on about it. Yes, this happens, and it is a perfect example, but not the one you think. An immigrant child who moves to the United States goes to school in English, for now. They answer questions in English, they do their homework in English, they take exams in English, their classmates speak English, they get corrected constantly by teachers, their classmates probably make fun of them if they make mistakes, so they constantly get corrected all the time. This is not passive immersion. That is the most active practice environment imaginable. They are reading, writing, listening, and speaking English all the time with constant feedback for 6 or 7 hours a day, sometimes more.
That's exactly what happens whenever you're an immigrant. You go to a country and you try to learn the language. Here in the US, I can speak to that since I'm actually here. The way that we have it set up is if you don't speak English well enough to thrive in your classes like you probably should, then we do have extra supports there for you. So we'll have somebody who helps you with your homework to try and translate things into your native language so that you can get that comparison between the languages. So for instance, you may have like a chemistry assignment in English that you have to do, but they'll translate the instructions into Spanish or whatever language it is that you speak so that you can then understand what the instructions are and then try and do the assignment. They're still required to do the assignment in English because the teacher doesn't speak whatever language it may be, but the idea here is that you would use your resources that are there in addition to all of the English stuff. So it's even more impressive than what he's saying here is that you're getting constant feedback, and that feedback loop of you practicing something, getting feedback on it, practicing again, getting feedback, that is what actually promotes learning. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about comprehensible input. So whenever we say comprehensible input, what we mean is you have something that you can understand and something that you can't understand. And with the information you can understand, you can interpret what's happening on the stuff that you don't understand. So basically you have 90% of the stuff you can understand, 10% of it you can't. And that 10% that you can't understand is being able to be fed into from this other 90% that you do understand. So he's showing us what comprehensible input would look like if you did it for 7 hours a day. So yeah, that works. And he just said it works. So the only difference is that instead of doing it for 7 hours a day, we're looking for like an hour a day. It's going to slow your progress. You're not going to learn the language as quickly as an immigrant child living in a foreign country where they don't speak the language. That's obvious, but you're still going to be learning a lot faster than if you just, passively watch some soap operas with your mom or whatever.
So of course they become fluent fast. They have no choice. You'd probably learn fast in that situation as well. Now ask yourself honestly, is that what you're doing when you watch a Netflix series with subtitles on while day drinking on a Tuesday? No, of course not. It's not even close. Here is the pattern I see over and over again with adult language learners. They find a method that feels effortless, that fits into their existing life, and they do it for months, sometimes years. And then they wonder why they still can't have a real conversation. And the answer is always the same. Effort creates results. Comfort just creates the illusion of results. If your language learning method is easy and fun, you're probably wasting your time. If it requires no mental effort, it's producing no real results. A language is a skill. And like any other skill, like playing the piano, learning to code, learning jiu-jitsu, surfing, you only improve in the areas you deliberately and repeatedly practice.
Okay, I always put it as like working out in the gym. If you never work out on your legs, obviously your legs are going to be your weakest part. If you never practice speaking in the language, obviously speaking is going to be your least proficient way of communicating. So everything comes down to what you practice is how you play, whether that be a sport, whether that's working out with just trying to get muscle tone or anything like that, or if it's in this case, language learning. If you don't practice writing, your writing's going to suck. If you don't practice speaking, your speaking's going to suck. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. The difference is that we're not talking about how do you practice that. So let's see what else we got to say.
Watching someone else play music does not make you better at playing music. Watching sports doesn't make you better at sports, and consuming content in a language does not make you a speaker of that language. You are an adult. You are smarter than a child. Most of you, at least. You can learn consciously and deliberately. And that is an enormous advantage, but only if you actually use it. So what should you do? What does actually work? Well, after learning a dozen languages and helping thousands of students, I've narrowed it down to 3 non-negotiable things. The first thing is vocabulary and sentences. Learned actively, non-passively. Number 2 is listening, a lot. Again, structured, deliberate, with purpose. And speaking from day one, every single day, without exception. That's what really works.
It's good that he adds that extra caveat in there for part 2, because part 2 was basically just do the thing that I just told you for the last 5 minutes, doesn't actually do anything. But then he adds in the caveat that you're supposed to like do stuff with the language instead of just listening to it, which kind of saves the whole process here. But I just find it entertaining that he almost forgot. And then you can see like the wheels turning in his head of like, wait, no, I just said that doesn't work. And then he has to like add those extra caveats, because that's what's missing from all of this to begin with, is comprehensible input is not just about the input. It's about what you do with the input.
Let's go through each one of them in detail. Most people learn vocabulary the wrong way. They open an app and they swipe through flashcards. They memorize isolated random words like apple, book, run, beautiful, and then they forget them within a week because those words have no context, no real purpose, so no real meaning. Here's what you should do instead. You learn sentences. Whole, complete, useful sentences. Not sentences from a textbook about things that never happen in real life, or that weird Duolingo stuff about bears and bananas. No, realistic sentences for real life. Things you would actually say in real life situations. So every day, write down 20 or 30 sentences about one specific topic, like introducing yourself, or talking about your job, or describing your hometown, or your opinions, or your hobbies, or plans for the weekend, things like that. Then translate them into your target language and memorize the entire block. That is what I call language islands.
Okay, he's got a fancy name for it, but this is something that I've mentioned before on the channel, and that is that if you're doing flashcards, just putting a word on a flashcard and looking at the flashcard and flipping it back and forth is a useless waste of your time. Again, learning words isolated without having some sort of context to go with it is not very useful. I would say that it's actually helpful to have both. So you could have like, this word means this. This is the thing you're focusing on, but you still have like the context in which it was written in some sort of sentence. I would caution you about just translating the words that you want to be able to say in your native language and then translating those into the language that you're trying to learn. The problem that can come up from this is several-fold. But number one, you may come up with the wrong translation, in which case you're going to solidify things that are wrong. And number two, you may be saying things in a way that is basically just your language translated into the target language, and that's not necessarily how people communicate in the target language. So Occasionally I'll use phrases on this channel that is an Anglicism or a word or a phrase that is used in English that we just kind of stole and put into German. And people will comment in the comments below saying something like, well, you just use this phrase, no one would ever say it like that, you actually say it this way. And the reason that is because this is how my American brain works, and that's how I was thinking you should say it. That's not necessarily that it's a wrong thing. It is something that people would understand still. It's just that that's not the natural way of things. And if you're trying to get to like that C1, C2 level, learning some of these unnatural ways of speaking can be a problem. So be cautious as translating your own sentences for your flashcards. But in addition to that, try and find somewhere where you can get these sentences that are for sure correct and set up in a way that you can actually use them for success rather than setting yourself up to fail early on just because you don't know what you don't know, and therefore you don't know that you're misleading yourself.
And why does this work so much better? Because language does not work in individual words. It works in patterns. When you learn a sentence, you learn vocabulary and grammar and the rhythm of the language simultaneously. You learn how the language actually sounds when you hear the same sentences over and over again. You do this every single day with one new language island per day. And after 1 month, 30 language islands, 30 groups of sentences, 600 or 900 sentences in total, you'll be able to speak about most topics. And at that point, you're not a beginner anymore. You have real, usable language. Of course, to learn these sentences, you need to listen to them a lot. Listening is essential. And what you listen to matters enormously. Here's the mistake most people make. They either watch those dumbed down videos for beginners for years and years, or they jump straight to films that they can't understand at all. So you either give up or convince yourself that you're learning something, and you keep doing it for years without getting any results.
Okay, he's hit on something here again that just kind of illustrates that he doesn't understand what comprehensible input actually is. And he says that you are listening to, like if you're watching a movie and you don't know what any of it means, that's missing the comprehensible part of the comprehensible input. It's in the name. You're supposed to be able to comprehend it. If you're watching something that you don't know what any of it is, you're missing the 90-10 rule part of this, which is you understand 90% of it, and then you try to figure out the other 10%. And if you're only doing the listening part with 90% that you don't understand and you catch like clips and phrases every once in a while, you're doing yourself a disservice. So yeah, starting with films is a bad idea, but discounting the beginner stuff is also very deceptive because you can get hung up on doing the beginner stuff forever. Like lots of people will spend hours upon hours watching YouTube videos of beginner level stuff, and they'll spend too much time on it and you kind of get stuck in that rut. And that makes sense. But if you're just starting out, the beginner stuff is there, and they call it the beginner stuff because it's for beginners so that you can learn these things so that you can get to the point where you can watch a film later on.
Here's the correct progression, the right way of doing it. Phase 1, you listen to your own sentences. Take your language islands that you wrote, you create audio files with text-to-speech software, and you listen to them on repeat.
I usually don't pick on someone for their accent because if you have an accent, it means that you speak another language, and that's an admirable thing. But if you're going to tell someone how to learn a language and be a hyperpolyglot, super, I assume this guy is legit. He's actually learned all 12 languages. But you can clearly hear his Eastern European sounding accent throughout the entire video. And the reason is he's been listening to the text-to-speech apps, or he's been listening to his own recordings of himself reading things in the target language. And so his English is skewed in the way that he hasn't been listening to either native speakers or people who know what they're talking about. And so he's been stuck on this rut of using the wrong kind of input. So while you are learning the language, you're going to learn the language with such an odd twist that you're going to be able to hear immediately every single time that you're a non-native speaker. So you end up having this recurring problem of you learn the basics with an odd tilt to it. And because you put your baseline at a tilt, everything after that gets built on a tilt. And before you know it, you've built the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and you don't actually have something that's going to withstand being up to the C1, C2 level.
You can listen to them on your commute, at the gym, You can listen to them while doing lots of different things. Listen to them over and over again until every sentence sounds completely natural, until you know them by heart, until you don't even have to think. And once you know those really well, then you move on to native content. On topics you already know, topics you find interesting. Find native speaker content about topics that you like, and I'm talking about real content, not language learning content, Spanish for beginners, drooling Spanish, that kind of nonsense.
He just made a jump that does not work in real life. He just went from you learned a few phrases, 20 phrases was his example. You learned a few phrases, and then once you've memorized those phrases, go look for content that is something of your interest. If you're interested in it, great, that's amazing for you, but that doesn't translate to comprehensible input. And again, you need to be able to understand what you're listening to, otherwise it doesn't matter, which is what his point was all along. So if you're going straight from, I learned 20 sentences, now I'm going to listen to a podcast about gaming, what are we doing? You just skipped over like 17 steps. Yes, you still need those basic level things. And those basic level things are called that because they need to be there at the basic level of things before you build on top of that. You can't just go straight from step 1 to step 10 and think that you're going to have a natural progression or even make progress off of that.
Real content about really interesting topics, learn the topic-specific vocabulary, and listen to that content all the time. And very soon you'll be able to understand it.
He just made the same logical jump that he made at the beginning of the video where he was saying that someone was watching these telenovelas all day with their mom and never picked up any Spanish. And now he's telling you, eventually you'll learn it. This is the same thing you just said didn't work. How are we supposed to believe you now that you're saying that you should do the thing you just told us not to do?
Things like sports, technology, true crime, history, whatever you're into. And yeah, it will be difficult at first. You will miss words, you will miss entire sentences, but that's fine. That is part of the process. Your ears are calibrated to the real speed of the language. You stick with it, and within weeks, you will notice the gap closing rapidly. And this is the part that most people avoid, but it's also the most important one. Speaking a language and understanding a language are two different skills. They're complementary, but they're different.
So he's talking about listening to a bunch of content and eventually you'll learn how to understand it. But he skips all of the steps in the middle that says, how? What do you do with the information that you're watching? What do you do with the input that you're watching? He just mentioned earlier that you can't just passively watch something and think that you're going to understand it. So what are we doing with those videos? My method that I've been preaching for a while on this channel is basically 3 times a viewing of everything. So you watch it the first time with just no context, you just watch it straight through. You find like a 10-minute clip and you watch that 10-minute clip. And then you just see what you understand. If you don't understand all that much, not a big deal. You watch it the second time, but you pause it every time you don't understand something. See if you can find a transcript or if you can find subtitles or something like that. Or if you can just like hold your phone up while it's on the Google Translate, trying to translate from whatever language it is into your native language. Use that to find what words and phrases it was that you didn't understand. Write those down onto flashcards maybe, and use that to kind of study for the next day. And then the next day, you can watch it for your 3rd time, and now you have all that background knowledge and you will understand the video better. If that doesn't make it the first time around, try it again, do the same process again. But use that same content, use it over and over again, and you end up building vocabulary around it rather than just passively watching something, which is kind of what he's been alluding to. Maybe he's got more to say, but we'll see.
You can listen to Spanish every day for a year and still freeze up the moment someone speaks to you, because understanding and producing are different things. And you have to train both. So here's what I want you to do. Talk to yourself out loud. All the time, every day. Narrate what you're doing. Describe what you see. Think out loud in the language. Have imaginary conversations. Interview yourself. Tell your story. And yes, it will feel strange at first, but you will get used to it, and it really works.
I've been advocating for this for a while on my channel as well. Just speaking to yourself, if it's internal, you can do that so that you don't have the weirdness of, walking around speaking German while you're in the United States, and just kind of talking to yourself in a foreign language, people get kind of suspicious of that. So try and avoid that. But you can talk to yourself in your brain. I've talked about translating conversations that you've really had so that you can try and work on things that might happen in real life. And I've given pretty much the same types of tips on this channel. It's just general good advice. You can't learn to speak the language unless you're going to speak the language. What I've also advocated for, though, is speaking with another person. And that's something that he misses here. And that is because if you're only listening to your own speech, you're probably making an error or two here and there. And if that's the case, you're continually solidifying that error through your vocabulary because you're saying the wrong thing. And then you don't know that you're saying the wrong thing because you're not a native speaker and you're not the teacher. So you keep saying this wrong thing over and over again, and you're just continually building on that bad information. So again, speak with someone else and see if that other person finds mistakes that you're making. Have them correct you, whether it's something off of italki or some sort of online tutor or one of those websites that I've been talking about on my channel of like Teacher AI or something like that, where you can chat back and forth with someone or at least a program that's relatively good at it so that you can get that feedback rather than just continually solidifying bad habits.
Also, use shadowing. Take the audio files of your language islands and immediately repeat everything you hear out loud, word for word. And don't just repeat the words. Copy everything. The intonation, the rhythm, pauses, the speed, the emotion behind the words, everything.
Okay, this is important that he didn't mention earlier that you were taking audio clips from the authentic materials that you were listening to. If you're doing that, then yes, this advice is solid. But if you were recording yourself earlier for the 20 sentences or whatever in each of the little islands of information, whatever he called it, then you're recording yourself. And again, you can solidify those bad mistakes. But shadowing native speakers is fantastic advice. If you listen to a dialogue between two people, saying the quote out loud, trying to get their intonation and the feeling behind it, and working on your acting skills to try and be like, I can be exactly like that person. And then you can kind of use that to twist your own voice into it. So let's say I start practicing with some De Niro quotes and stuff, and then after a while I stop using his voice and start using my own voice, but with the intonation from his voice. So you can kind of work those things together so that you find your own voice in the language, and then you also still get to work on your intonation and how the rhythm of the language actually works.
This is not just pronunciation training. This is full physical conditioning. You're training your mouth muscles, your tongue, your breath. It's muscle memory. Your vocal cords literally need to learn new positions, new movements. And this only happens through repetition. Daily, deliberate, out loud repetition. And also, translate your sentences back from your native language into the target language. Cover the target language sentences and try to say them from memory. And do it again and again until you can do it instantly, smoothly, and without hesitation.
So we're describing flashcards. Again, he's talking about using flashcards with full sentences, but still just flashcards. Just because you put them on a piece of paper doesn't mean they're not flashcards. You can put flashcards on a piece of paper and fold it in half. Still flashcards. But yeah, that's how people use flashcards.
That is the moment where you really know the sentence. Not just in your head, but in your mouth. You can actually say it. And there's one more thing I would like to mention before I finish the video. There is a belief in modern culture that everything should always be easy and fun, including learning. That if something is hard or uncomfortable, you must be doing it wrong. That there must be an easier way, a hack, a shortcut, an app. And that belief is costing you years of your life. Successful people don't think like that. The things worth having, real skills, real fluency, real confidence in a new language, those things require real effort. It doesn't have to feel miserable, but you need to do the work. You need focused, daily, deliberate effort. The good news is that when you use the right method, learning useful sentences with language islands, structured listening, daily speaking practice, the progress then is fast enough that it becomes its own motivation. Real progress is much more motivating than any streak on any app. You are an adult. You are smarter, more focused, and more capable than any child. You've got all those advantages. Use them. So here's your action plan. starting today. 1. Learn sentences, not words. Write 30 sentences about your life in your target language. Today, right now. 2. Listen actively. Create audio files of those sentences and listen to them on repeat, over and over again. And 3. Speak those sentences out loud. Say those sentences out loud over and over again, at least 10 times, the whole list, right now. That's it. Now do this every day for the rest of the month. If you do just this every single day, in a few weeks, you'll be having real conversations in the language that you're learning. You don't need years of passive watching, thousands of hours of YouTube videos, long streaks in apps. What you need are real sentences for the real world and active practice. So stop trying to learn effortlessly and start doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem here is that lots of people will think that something does have to have some sort of shortcut, some sort of hack, some sort of app that you use, or the thing that makes everything easier. And while that would be great if that's how that works, it's not. And this works for literally any skill you were ever trying to build up. You're supposed to be bad at it. So it's one of the things people are concerned about with AI, is that if we don't have graphic designers who are just bad at their job, continually to hone their skills over and over again, if they're just going to, prompt ChatGPT to do some stuff, rather than actually being bad at their jobs for a little while, then they won't have those skills, and no one will actually have the skills. We'll only have the AI to tell us how art is supposed to be done, and then no one will be able to actually make real art anymore. So basically, this is the exact same thing as what it is for any skill building. The reason we give kids homework isn't so that they can go home and figure out how to use ChatGPT to do the homework. We make them do homework so that they go home and practice what they learned in class. So it's a matter of getting you to actively engage with the language. So while I disagree with his assertions about comprehensible input and how language learning works in general in those terms, overall, his advice is solid. He teaches you some pretty basic ideas of how to learn a language. If you want to learn more about the way that I would personally show you my system for language learning, I've got a link in the description and also right over here, so you can check out those videos. But that's all I've got for today. I hope you like this kind of video. Let me know in the comments down below if you do, and I will see you in the next one. Bis dann. Tschüss.